Hi team, this is the fourth video in this video series regarding how to fill out the Appendix 5 Financial Sustainability Worksheet. And so far we have been able to fill out most of the worksheet so far. We filled in, the first video covered how to fill in the general information, the operational cost section, as well as the target section. We went over average inflation rates, as well as operational cost worksheets as well. The second video covered the capital cost, and the third video, which was quite lengthy, but so I thank you all for sticking with me and working through all those details, was figuring out how to work through each of these repairs and replacement costs. So then this video then leaves just a couple details I wanted to cover here still on this worksheet, as well as this new worksheet called the price increase schedule. And then after this we will be done and complete in filling out this financial sustainability worksheet, after of course declaring whatever the price would be. So in this, one thing before launching it, much of this video is going to be about inflation, but before launching into that, there's one more piece I wanted to cover on this worksheet. It's called transportation and labor cost. Now up to this point, capital costs have all been labor related, and even as we work through all of filling in these white boxes, it's all been about material costs for each repairing and replacing each of these pieces of equipment. So then this leaves this open question about what to do about labor costs. There are some pieces of equipment that are going to require someone to come out to the community to repair. So for example, when the pump breaks, the operator, someone in the community, might be able to replace it, but it's probably more than likely you're going to call a mechanic, or you may even call Water Mission, or somebody who has some level of knowledge on how to replace that. So in that regard, there is some labor cost that the community is going to take on. There are some things like patching. If I'm going back to the concrete structure, when you're patching the enclosure and you're patching a crack, you would assume that the operator would be able to do that, and therefore there may not be any additional labor cost. So each of these has been considered, but at the same time, transportation and labor costs, as you'll see, doesn't require you to enter anything. We didn't want to introduce another level of complexity into filling out this worksheet, but we did want, again, like I said, the goal is to be accurate. We wanted to be accurate in figuring out how much labor would be required and how much should the community be saving to provide for that labor. But then also acknowledging that not all of these are going to require labor to oversee and to repair and replace. That will require additional money. Like I said, the operator will have potentially be able to take care of some of these things on his own, and he already is paid by a salary. But there is some cases where we may need to call Water Mission or a local engineer or even a mechanic to the community, and they're going to likely to require payment for their services. So these have automatically been integrated and calculated into this summary table, as well as the U.S. dollar table. And this is based on the distance to the community. This is based on what is put in the follow-up cost section here of the worksheet. So if I scroll to here, this talks about community visits. So even if there are no community visits from Water Mission, this is automatically still calculated into these repair and replacement costs. So there will always be a labor provision here, even if you decide that there will be no follow-up cost. Now, this is a bit confusing, because what's the difference between a follow-up cost and a maintenance and repair visit? So it's assumed that Water Mission will go to the community however many times you declare on this worksheet. So you say that that Water Mission will show up to the community once per year. That's just for general follow-up and checkup, and they may do some maintenance in that meeting, they may not. But there are also instances where the pump perhaps breaks and Water Mission is called up on the telephone, and then we go out to that community and incur expenses in paying to get there, as well as for the parts that we buy as well. So So with that, there is some level of provision and estimation of cost for what a community visit to water mission costs. Now this is then added into each of these cost categories, depending on what depending on the level of complexity. So we're assuming that a structure is not that complex to maintain, so that hasn't been entered into here, but it has been entered into, like, for example, the electrical supply and the water treatment equipment, like the LWTS, for example. The cost of labor has been estimated into this cost. We do have one scenario that we need to think about, though. We do work. We're very generous at times in going to communities that are very far from communities, or far from our country office. So let's say if we take on a community that's 600 kilometers from the office, and maybe you'll see that this cost balloons to a certain extent. Now, if this is the case, then there is a check in this calculation just to make sure that this cost doesn't get out of hand, and it's been capped at to make sure that when it gets to above a certain amount, then it's going to be likely that the community will not be calling Water Mission anymore. They'll find someone that's a little bit closer to their proximity to be able to do those replacements for them. So the cost won't be $400 as we said here, but rather it is more likely to be somewhere around $200 or so dollars. Okay, so that just to let you know that there is a way that labor is integrated into this table. So this then moves me to this next section called inflation. And this is perhaps where we can see the greatest significant impact in the financial sustainability worksheet. Now, there's been no guidance on what this number should be in the past. In fact, I've noticed that we sent out a template, and for the most part, that template number has been used in most of these projects. But inflation essentially says that the price of all of our equipment is going to go up each year, every year, into the future. And so in that, there's got to be something that we should do at Water Mission to be able to accommodate that. And these communities should be ready when the pump is more expensive later, when they need a replacement, than it is today. There is unfortunately like an issue with that, and as we've been constantly underestimating what the inflation rate has been in our country, in all of our country programs. We've been using a number around 2.8 to 3% across most of our projects, but you'll see that every program except Peru has an inflation rate over the last 15 years that is above that number. In fact, most are even above 5%. So most countries have an inflation rate that's almost twice what we've been estimating. And it's noted that Malawi's here is, I took a special average here to take out the error of hyperinflation, just as a note. If you have more questions on that, feel free to contact me. But these are, outside of Malawi, these are the inflation rates in each of these countries over the last 15 years. And I've got significant commentary on this in the document I put together and to how each of these are calculated. So that the issue with it then is because these inflation rates are so high relative to what we've been using, this then means that that prices can be doubling rather quickly. So think about like without going into all the math that goes into this, when we have a 7% inflation rate, that means that the prices in that country are doubling every 10 years or so. And if you have an inflation rate of about 5%, it's doubling about every 15 years or so. So these prices are going up, and they're going up rather quickly. And we've been accommodating this only in part in our past FSWs. So going forward, we want to try to be as accurate in declaring what we think the inflation rate is going to be in that community. But then unfortunately what that does is it creates a significant burden to the community. Now remember, if I said that prices are doubling every 10 to 15 years in our country programs, that means all of this capital cost I said here in today's costs, $719,000, what does that mean in 10 to 15 years? It means that we're going up over $1 million here and over $60,000. This means that we're creating quite a burden on the project within the community in regards to trying to maintain and to reach these costs. So what does that mean instead? Well, I've asked this question here, which is there a plan for price increases? Which is an interesting question to ask for when we're talking about inflation, because what this means is there's this assumption that I've said where as the prices of equipment goes up, so do all of our operational expenses, but we'd also assume that our prices should increase with inflation as well. So if prices are doubling every 10 to 15 years, why shouldn't the water price also double in that amount of time? Now I understand that increasing prices in communities is extremely difficult, and it can be hard and even creates community friction. So I also realize that the price increases may not be possible, but this is our next attempt to figure out how to cover down on inflation and see if we can figure out a way and a plan with the Safe Water Committee. So in this, I asked this question with a drop-down menu: is there a plan for price increases? And and what this is going to do, depending on your answer, is going to change what the target is in that month. So you see it's currently at $2,900 and $120. And if I say that there is a plan for price increases, that's what the numbers are. But what if I change this to no, and that we're not going to be able to increase prices because there's just going to be too much community friction? Well, you can see that the numbers changed significantly. It went from $120 now to $320. Again, it's because the prices double so quickly over the course of time that they have to sell so much water today to make up for the losses in prices in the future. So yes, there is a potential to set this up so that you don't have price increases, but it puts a significant strain on the community. But I encourage our staff, though, to be honest. If you feel that the community cannot withstand price increases, to still go ahead and say this, and that we just then need to make a note on this project that we will have to make additional separate provision for repairing and replacing the system into the future. So I encourage you that even if you feel price increases are not possible, please don't just put yes. Be as honest as you can in this answer, and then we just make notes in regards to the project plan and project design, depending on whether we feel that this target then is appropriate. So then, of course, this bears the question of whether, if you say that yes, we're optimistic that the community will provide some pushback, but ultimately will accept price increases in the end, and it says that's fair given that even the prices of Coca-Cola and even their cell phone bills are going up over the course of time. If we're able to have that conversation with the committee and the community then you see that this provides the lower and what seems to be a more attainable savings target. But then we need to communicate with committees as to how often and when price increases should take place. So hence this is where the price increase schedule tab comes in. So if you say that there is a plan for price increases and the community does plan to be implementing this strategy, then go to this tab, and this then provides an output that provides some guidance as to when these price increases should take place. So here this is a Honduran community. First, let me declare what the price is going to be. So I haven't done that yet. This is one of the final steps in this when filling out this worksheet. Go back to the price schedule here. I'm going to say it's 1 per 20 liters, or it's going to be 55 per month. And you can see that this is the suggested prices in each of these years. Now it's known that you're not going to increase the price every year, but it's making a suggestion that within 15 years that it should be at 2 lempiras if it's at 1 lempira today. And then even far away into the future, here we are at 2018, but by 2050, it should be 5 lempiras. in after 30 years or so in this project. And even at year 20, you have a reference in 2038 to say that you probably should be pricing at about 2.5 lempiras. And this is all dependent on what the inflation rate is. This will change, this price schedule increase will change depending on whether you're in Tanzania, whether you're in Uganda, Kenya, Peru, Mexico. It all depends on what this inflation rate is. The price schedule will change depending on what these numbers are. Prices will have to increase faster in some of these communities and a little bit slower in these communities. But that is ultimately how it feels like in order to prevent overburdening communities with providing for inflation is to model for some level of price increases. And we have observed this in past projects. So I would say that this is something that I think is attainable, but this is also something we need to pilot. And we're going to need your feedback on here as to say whether this is possible and whether this is something that we can go ahead and move forward with. Just a couple other notes on this worksheet. This also shows that as prices increase, so does revenue. So as we're assuming that as we increase prices that we're going to bring in more money, but the costs are going to go up, the monthly costs, as well as the amount of money that's going into the bank account. And this is to keep up with in order to keep up with the level of inflation. So it's kind of inflation can be a very complex subject, but it's essentially this worksheet is saying that we're making a provision that this year we're going to estimate like 3,500 in lempiras, and that in 10 years 3,500 is the same as 5,800. So that just like 5,800 is the same as 3,500 today. So in a sense to say that as prices increase, so the amount of savings we need to take in, so the amount of expenses, and so do our prices as well. Okay, so I know this again is complex. I'm really happy to talk this out further, but ultimately I think I want to have a conversation with all of you to say whether a price increase strategy is something that's possible, and provide you tools and be able to have that conversation well and in training committees and communities to do this well. Before a final note, before wrapping up this video, you'll see that we have gone through over the course of these 5 videos and filling out this worksheet from the beginning to end. This was at one time a blank worksheet but now we've filled in the general information. We've gone through how to fill in this inflation rate on this new tab. I encourage you to go ahead and look with detail in this operational cost tab. We filled out the capital cost tab, which helped fill in the information on this tab for repairs and replacements, and the information here then gets imported into this section, which ultimately then provides some feedback on the provisions within the community. So I hope that this has been a helpful exercise. Again, and I hope that this is something that you will feel that helps you in getting your job done. And I hope that it proves to be an exercise that ultimately leads us to providing more attainable goals, but as well as more sustainable goals for each of our communities. So again, I know this is somewhat more complex, but at the same time, I hope that it's also easy to digest, and this also increases the level of excellence that Water Mission provides for its projects. Again, please feel free to reach out to me, Mike Staub, mstaub@watermission.org, and let me know if there's anything that I can be walking through with you and your team as we implement this new tool. Also happy to have some feedback here if there's anything we can improve and make a bit easier as well. So thank you for your support, and I appreciate your partnership here as we continue to bring safe water to people around the world.